everybody. It's Miss Amy at the Grass Valley Library. Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Random Acts of Science. As you know, our summer learning program is in full swing, and this week we're talking about China. So, a couple of thousands of years ago, the first kites were built and flown in China, and they become a part of the Chinese culture. So today we're going to build a kite really quickly, a very easy kite, and talk about the physics behind why kites fly. So let's get started. If you pick up an adventure bag from the Grass Valley Library or any of the participating libraries, you will find a set of instructions on how to build your kite. So we're going to use that today as we get rolling. You're going to need a couple things from home to do this experiment. You're going to need 2 pieces of paper. I've got 2 different colors of paper, one for the body, one for the tail. You can use whatever you've got. A stapler, some scissors, some string. It doesn't have to be kite string, but thin string works the best. A ruler and a pencil to help you construct your kite. So let's get started. We're going to start with the body of the kite. So why does a kite fly? There's 2 main reasons. One is because the body of a kite acts like a sail. And if it were straight up and down or straight out in front of you, the wind would just go around it or push it away. But when we tilt our kite at the right angle, some of the air goes across the top, but most of the air is going to catch that kite and go underneath. And it's that underneath motion that is pushing the kite up higher in the air. So that's the first reason. The sail is big enough to force that air underneath. But how do we keep it at that right angle? And the way we do that is by adding a tail to the kite. So that tail is going to weight the kite in the right direction so that the wind can do its job and lift that kite upwards. So let's start with that body or the sail of the kite. This is a super simple way to do that. We're going to take an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. We're going to fold it in half the short way. Think taco, not banana. And then we're going to find the center of that and mark it. So I'm going to mark it on the crease side of the short or the long edge once we've folded it in half. So I know it's an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, so half of 8.5 is 4 1/4. So I'm going to mark that right there. And then we're going to put another mark at the quarter point. So half of 4 1/4 is 2 1/8. And I'm going to put another mark right there. So now I've got a piece of paper with 2 marks on it. That center mark we're going to use in a minute, but the first thing we're going to do is fold the front 2 corners of the kite over. And we're going to find that first mark, like that, and we are going to put a staple in there. When you look at your kite from the front, it should look kind of like a paper airplane, but it should have a heart shape on the nose. So if you've got that, you're doing it right. And the second thing we're going to do is put that second staple right at that center line, and that is how we're going to tie our string off. That's going to be where we attach that string. So you're going to take your string. I have found that it's easiest to make sure you have a very sharp or very clean end on that, but also the easiest thing to do is to make a loop and then feed the loop through one of those back ends of the staple where it comes over and makes a little hoop for you. So let's see if I can do this. Sometimes it helps to get this wet. So if you make a loop in the end of the string and you poke it through one of those holes, we should end up with it threaded through. And then we're going to tie a couple knots to make that connection really tight until it's on there pretty securely. We're going to cut off that little tail that's sticking out. And there we go. We've got our kite and we've got the string, and now we need to make the tail. So let's move on to that part. The instructions for the tail are on the back side of the instructions sheet. And for that, we're going to need your second sheet of paper. So the first thing we're going to do is cut the end off that paper. That's the only part we're going to need for the tail. And it needs to be 2.5 inches wide by the length of that paper. So let's measure that. 2.5 inches. And then I'm just going to cut that part of it off. So you've got a rectangle that looks like this. You're gonna fold it in half. Again, think taco, not banana, so that you have a folded piece of paper like that. The next part is to draw, or to divide that into 5 semi-equal sections. It does not need to be perfect. So I'm just gonna make some marks on the page right across there. And then I'm gonna cut up almost to the edge, but not quite to the edge, until we have 5 little fingers on the bottom. So you'll see what I mean here. We're gonna cut it pretty close to the top. None of this has to be perfect. Okay, and when you're done, you'll have a piece of paper that looks like that. So it still doesn't look much like a tail, but then here's where the tricky part is. So we're gonna rip it so that it turns out to be one long string of paper. So we're gonna rip every other cut. So across this end, I'm gonna skip the first one. I'm gonna rip the second one. So I'm gonna rip it open like that. I'm gonna skip that third one, and I'm gonna rip the fourth one. And then when I flip it around, since I've already ripped one, I'm gonna skip that one, and I'm gonna rip the next one. And then I'm gonna skip one, and I'm gonna rip the next one. So when we're done, we've got one long strand of paper, and that's gonna be our tail. Attaching the tail is super easy. We're gonna take it and pop it into the end of our sail, or the body of the kite, and then we're just gonna put a staple to keep it in place. And there it is. That's your kite. We are ready to find some wind and an open field and go take it for a test drive. So I hope your kite is as easy to build as that was. And thank you so much for joining me today. Next week, we're going to have another episode of Random Acts of Science.